Hello, this is Jennifer Warrens, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
The architecture profession has tried for 70-plus years to present modernist design as the solution to social change, whether it's public housing, urban sprawl, or housing the homeless. The federal government, for decades, provided billions to build public housing, most of it modernist, in most major cities. The idea was to take all the poor people, which generally meant people of color, and herd them into large buildings. The slums were gone. The socially disadvantaged had a nice place to live. Seems like a great plan, right? Cities and states were then responsible for running things after that. And surprise, surprise, few cities had the money or the political will to maintain these projects properly or provide the infrastructure and sustainability any community needs, like stores, schools, daycare, healthcare, places of worship, and most importantly, jobs. Basically, this scheme was just warehousing people. Architecture, which beat its mostly male chest during the 60s, stopped boasting in the 70s as these communities frequently fell apart. Many housing blocks, like the infamous Pruitt-Igoe project in St. Louis, were eventually abandoned, then destroyed. Then, starting in the 1980s, Republican-led federal cuts to mental health programs and states unwilling to pick up that bill started an outpouring of all but the most severely mentally ill into the streets. And then we all started to hear about a new national issue, homelessness.
Homelessness is hard enough for those affected. What we don't fully realize is how it affects everyone and everything, from healthcare to education to public safety. Specifically, the homeless problem in California has reached crisis levels not seen since the Depression. But homelessness is in the bloodstream of every major city. Despite years of initiatives, systemic racism, indifference, relentlessly rising real estate values, this year COVID-19, and an unfortunate but common belief that homeless people brought it all on themselves and don't deserve any kind of free ride.
Our first guest today is someone who fights this battle every day. Andrea Urton from San Jose, California, is CEO of HomeFirst Services of Santa Clara County, a provider of services, shelter, and housing opportunities to the county's homeless. Before that, she was COO for Alum Rock Counseling Center, a clinical director for EMQ Family First, and a lecturer for the Santa Clara University. She sits on the boards of Hunger at Home and Legacy Alviso. Is that how you say that?
Yes, correct.
And she was recognized as the 2018 Woman of Influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, thank you, George. Thank you, Tom.
Born and raised in Los Angeles, Michael Lehrer is the founding partner of Lehrer Architects LA. His firm's design work is grounded in the idea that beauty is a rudiment of human dignity. He is an AIA Fellow, and his firm won the gold medal from AIA Los Angeles. Michael is Chairman Emeritus of the Harvard Graduate School of Design Alumni Council, where he created a leadership manifesto, the Engagement Party, which is now a centerpiece of GSD's 14,000-member community. Among other appointments, he is a past president of Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles, a board on which he still serves. Welcome, Michael.
Nice to be here.
So, Andrea, before we get started, I did not know until our ACE research team told me last week that you are a small plane pilot.
I am not.
You
I
are
don't
not?
know where they got that.
Oh.
I am not.
Oh, I've seen photos of you flying a plane.
Well, that was my boyfriend's plane, and for a moment, I had the stick.
Oh, I've done that before, yeah. Here, while we're flying level, hold this for a second while I take your picture.
Exactly.
Now land us.
And the rest is history.
Right.
Where did you fly to?
We've flown all over the place, down to Watsonville, around San Francisco. There's a little town called Columbia we like to go to. Mostly my boyfriend right now is a soaring pilot, so we don't have the opportunity for lots of flying together because it's a single-seater.
Oh, what is that kind of plane?
It's a plane without an engine, basically. So another plane tows you up. You get to the altitude of your desire, and they release the rope, and you look for air. You look for wave. You fly.
Oh, the gliders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And updrafts are important.
Yes.
And I remember you have to bank the little plane in a certain way to catch those updrafts, right?
You do. Yes, they're called thermals.
Yeah.
Thermals.
And it's really quiet.
Oh, it's so amazing. It's silent. There's no engine, so everything's quiet. You look over and there's birds soaring with you. It's just really, really cool.
Well, that's pretty neat. That is pretty neat. And Michael, a quick question for you. In the engagement party, is there a ring involved? Did you have to marry someone for this? What was going on?
Well, it's funny. I guess I hadn't quite thought of it in those terms, but I guess I did, since I met my wife on the first day we set on campus 45 years ago, and I proposed to her within 6 months. So there you go. I guess it really was an engagement party for me, and and one of the big ideas of building our community is anytime you have at least two members of the alumni community together, you have an alumni event. So we actually have alumni events at our house every day and every night.
That's pretty cool.
So what is a party?
Party?
I'm assuming it's not a party.
Well, no, although it's close enough that the association is nice. Partie is a French word, which I don't know if it's necessarily used in every school of architecture, but it's from the École des Beaux-Arts, the School of Fine Arts, which was really probably the dominant school in the late 19th century in Paris. And the partie is the concept. So it's the overarching architectural concept in a design. And
okay.
And it's a word that not everybody, but many, including myself, use when we crack the design, and we've gotten to that core idea.
Sounds classy.
Yes. Anything a little French sounds classy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Andrea, you are CEO of a major agency in Silicon Valley, but you also experienced homelessness personally growing up. What was that like?
I did. Well, it was terrifying. I was a teenager, and in high school, I worked full-time for the most part at Kentucky Fried Chicken, which was down the street from the apartment that I had been staying in. My home just was no longer safe for me to be there. So I did what a lot of teenagers do when they're in situations like that. I couch surfed. I did a lot of couch surfing. I would go from home to home, make myself useful. I would do laundry, I would cook, I would clean, be super respectful, anything I could do to stay for a little while. And I was lucky. There were 3 mothers, single mothers of my girlfriends, who allowed me to stay for periods of time.
You were very lucky. I mean, it could have turned out much worse.
I was incredibly lucky. And so when we talk about homelessness, I'm always very clear. I have never spent one night in a shelter as a homeless individual. That was not my journey. I was scared. There were times I slept in my car. There were times I didn't have food to eat. But I was one of the lucky ones, and I was able to figure my way out and get out. But I was able to get out with a lot of assistance. I didn't do it on my own.
How long were you couch surfing and car sleeping?
On and off for probably about 3 years.
Wow.
And then about a month before I graduated high school, my father owned the apartment that I was staying in, and he came home and told me he had sold it. And I had to be out in a matter of days.
Ooh, that's not good.
And I slept in my car again for a few more nights until I found a room to rent.
Do people recognize that personal experience that you've had when you talk with them, people who are actually on the street or living in shelters?
Yeah, I've actually I've been starting to share my story a little more freely now. It's not something I've done till recently. And the people that we serve are always so gracious, and many of them say, "Oh, no wonder you get it. Oh, no wonder you're so kind. No wonder you're so empathetic." I really approach the work with no shaming and no blaming, and we understand that everybody is in different spaces in their lives, and everybody has different skill sets. And so a lot of the people we serve are lacking skill sets, and so we do the best we can to figure out what they are and then educate around that and help them develop the skill sets they need to get housed and stay permanently housed.
What's the scale of the homeless problem in Silicon Valley, Andrea, approximately?
Well, I can speak for Santa Clara County. It's at least 10,000 homeless people a night.
Wow.
In the state of California, we've got a little over 151,000 homeless individuals. And in the nation, we've got over 500,000. We've got 550,000 people who are homeless on our streets as a nation.
But for California to have 150 out of 550, that's a huge chunk.
It is. It is. And it speaks to the high cost of housing and the unavailability of housing. Here in Silicon Valley, we have a vacancy rate of approximately 2 to 2.5%.
Wow. And, with COVID-19 and everybody being told to shelter at home, that's simply a contradiction in terms for these people.
It is. It
What do they do?
Is. They hunker down in their encampments. We have outreach teams that go out into the encampments. We take sleeping bags and blankets and hygiene kits. We also work with a group of nurses and doctors, and once we've identified somebody who needs medical care, we take them with us. We take the nurses and doctors with us into the encampments to treat the people. We provide therapy and case management and drug and alcohol support in the encampments as well.
Michael, you've had a lot of direct contact with the homeless as well.
Yes.
Tell us about that. You've done quite a bit of really direct interaction in understanding what their lives are like and how to get them housed.
Yeah, well, my engagement with the community and people who are unhoused, live on the street, began about 21 years ago when I designed the downtown homeless drop-in shelter in Skid Row. And it was a pretty radical project at the time. And it was for people who lived on the street, a respite. We had showers, a laundry, a clubhouse. It was centered around a courtyard. There was no gate on it for the first 3 years. It's where I began. The philosophy which was of that institution and which I've come to share is the notion of harm reduction, which is basically you meet people, as Andrea said, you basically meet people where they're at with no judgment. And since then, a few other projects in Skid Row. I've been on as you mentioned, the board and past president of an organization called Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles, when we provide healthcare and training and supportive services and that full range of things. And then in the last few years, we're doing everything from shelters. We've completed 2 and are doing 3 or 4 more. And we're doing about 10 projects for the currently houseless. But when these projects are built, projects from anywhere from 8 to 40 units. We have a team called Rethink Housing, which has a nonprofit developer, a community bank, and ourselves. And we actually just got a job the other day from LA County, which will be taking some existing motels and converting them into housing. So what's interesting is that from providing drop-in centers for people who are houseless on the street to homes for very rich people, and we've done the full gamut, the design exercise is the same, and the value systems are the same. I mean, every human being needs certain basics from their environment, and each of these projects inform the other. So for us, it's an exciting and rewarding time to be doing important work in this time and to have the full range of architecture. And it also really helps illuminate, what the value of architecture is and can be.
Andrea, when I look back at the 80s, beyond the spandex, I remember a time when homeless were really talked about as a problem to be sheltered primarily. When did it start to turn to actually housing the homeless?
Well, we had a movement probably about 10 years ago when people realized the way to actually solve homelessness wasn't just to shelter people. It was to actually house them. Let's give them a place to live. You mentioned in the 80s, Ronald Reagan closed down a lot of the institutions where a lot of people who were severely mentally ill were living. And unfortunately, when those places were closed, they weren't given really any alternatives. Yeah. And those people went to the streets. Many of those people are still on the streets today. Those are our chronically homeless individuals, and those are the people who are most vulnerable.
And I can't imagine that living on the street stabilizes your mental acuity much.
It does not. There is a pretty rapid rate of decompensation. If somebody isn't able to get housed within the first 30, 60, or 90 days, there often is a rapid decompensation. And by that I mean health issues, mental health issues, trauma. Within 4 hours of becoming homeless, a woman is likely to be approached for either a sexual favor, raped, or assaulted in some way. 4 hours.
4 hours?
Wow.
Yes.
And
It's dangerous out there.
Holy cow. What is the mix of male to female now in the population generally of homeless?
It's about 70-30 male, 70-30 female.
Okay. And
we're not quite sure why that is.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think, just my own perspective, women tend to gather together and create really fierce bonds. So my assumption is there's probably more female homelessness out there, but they're probably hunkered down living in some warehouse somewhere together.
Oh, so it's really not on the radar.
Probably.
The Reagan administration, kicked these people out of shelters. Why did they think they were there in the first place? They wanted to be? The thinking behind this just escapes me.
It escaped me at the time, and I was a kid, and I was thinking, well, that's kind of nuts. And yet the decision was made to deinstitutionalize spaces. That was the big movement at the time. And unfortunately, it created a mass population of homeless people.
I guess they just thought they'd go out and get a job and then get an apartment? That was that simple?
Or maybe family members would take them in. Care for them.
Yeah. Again, it was one of those things that the states were supposed to pick up the responsibilities for this. And state legislatures were also defunding a lot of these things, too, at the time. That was prevailing.
Well, I think there was also a sensibility, which was that if you were in bad straits, it was your fault. You must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And people for whom life has, took a bad turn, which at some point is virtually everyone, were stigmatized by it and in many ways for a long time dehumanized because of that.
Yes.
So besides government policy, we also have a prevailing force out there called Nimby.
Yeah.
Andrea, tell us what Nimby stands for.
Not in my backyard.
And how is that affecting the movement to help the homeless?
Well, it's a huge impact, unfortunately. It stops us from getting things done on a regular basis. We've opened several emergency interim housing sites during the course of the pandemic, which is just an amazing feat. And we were able to do this because Gavin Newsom released some of the restrictions on letting the community know and letting the community have a say. We started a bridge housing project. The mayor likes to call it tiny homes, about 5 years ago. It took us 4 years to get that built. Here in the pandemic, it took us 3 months to get 78 units up and running with shared living spaces. 3 months.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
I think that's been I don't want to say an upside, but a few of the outcomes of COVID is that things which seemed to be impossible all of a sudden became possible because we are in a universal emergency. And even the notion of being sheltered at home puts a focus on home and housing and frankly, I would say on architecture, because to shelter at home, you have to have a home. And it begs the question of people living on the street and getting each other sick, let alone, or people living in crummy places and being stuck there for a year versus places which are not crummy and nice and maybe even very nice. And I'm not talking about luxurious. I'm just talking about nice, light air, fresh air, and so forth. And I think that the openness because of this emergency, it sort of changed the perspective of things. Things which seemed impossible are no longer impossible. Things which seemed horrible are not nearly as horrible as these new crises and threats we're facing. And in California in general, and certainly as well in Southern California and in Los Angeles, there's an urgency about doing things and getting things built. I mean, certain types of buildings, as urgent as they are, buildings just take a long time. We've just completed, in fact, this afternoon we're going to photograph it. It's because it's just finishing. The first tiny homes, they're called pallet homes, our first tiny home shelter in L.A., and We just completed it. It was 13 weeks from when we got our contract. We actually started designing before we got the contract signed to completion of construction. And there, too, I mean, political leadership is really important because this is the first project. There are expenses involved and discoveries made. And, you know, when you do beta projects, when you try things out, you'll get some things right and you'll get some things wrong. And you need to make it safe to learn from the things that you've done wrong as opposed to be stigmatized and brought down. And that's sort of where we're at right now, and in a good way, I think.
13 weeks seems pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's darn fast.
From
well,
scratch.
As Andrea will attest, I mean, these tiny homes, the homes themselves go up in a matter of hours. It's the infrastructure and the site work which actually takes all the time and which actually costs the big bucks, and which depends on what city ordinances and environmental codes, et cetera, and ADA codes do you have to pay a premium to oblige, and which is there a possibility of not doing to save money and save time?
Now, Andrea, I understand there's a small but growing movement led by young people mostly called YIMBY, the opposite of NIMBY.
Oh.
Do you see that in Silicon Valley?
I do. Not as much as I'd like to, but I do. I'm working with a group of people in San Francisco right now who are very much YIMBYs, and they are actually advocating for an emergency interim housing site in their neighborhood.
So is that you're in my backyard?
Yes.
Oh, it is?
Yes, in my backyard.
Yes, in my backyard.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Again, I think that speaks to the importance of design. I think that the attitude has to be that it's critical that these projects enhance the neighborhoods into which they are put, so that people will become places of desire. And you know, if you think about folks in, let's say, in fancy neighborhoods, there's some cachet. Well, of course, you don't have a place that houses the formerly houseless in your neighborhood. Well, I do. I'm a good person, and we're a good community. I mean, I think that every one of these projects has the burden appropriately of being contextual, of enhancing the neighborhood. A better word would be in completing neighborhoods, that the culture evolves, that every complete neighborhood really has the full range of citizens in it, from people who used to live on the street to people who have been housed in homes for, forever.
81% of the homeless individuals in a specific neighborhood either lived there upon becoming homeless or are from that neighborhood. So I think when we give information that breaks down the myths and the fallacies around homelessness, it's important for people. I think it helps them gain a better understanding and makes them more open to having one of these facilities in their neighborhood.
Yep.
Andrea, tell us about the tiny home community you've been working on that's going to provide 40 individuals a respectful and dignified break.
Well, that's the Bridge Housing site that we opened, I want to say last February in San Jose. We've got another one coming live next month that we're very excited about. These are little sleeping cabins. Mayor likes to call them tiny homes, but they do not have plumbing. They've got a door, a window, electricity, heating, and cooling. They've got a desk, a bed, a chair. They've got minimal storage, and they're beautiful. It just, when you walk onto the site, which is all fenced, it looks like you're entering a little city. There's a dog park. We have raised garden beds for people to do gardening. We have a shower, bathroom, and laundry truck. Not a truck, a trailer. And then we have another building that's for the kitchen, the pantry, and offices. We also have 24/7 security
that's great.
so that
That's
they can keep an eye on the site.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important.
Where is it?
It's on Mawberry, across from the Berryessa Flea Market. So it's accessible to the bus line, and it's accessible to, anything they could need in the community.
That's great. How big are the houses?
They're actually 80 square feet.
That's
okay.
Tiny.
So they're small.
Yeah. But you can do a lot in 80 square feet, really.
Mm-hmm.
You can. And they're tall. They have very tall ceilings with a skylight. So the whole appearance is very bright, very welcoming. And again, just like your site, everything is movable. So they're not on foundations. The whole site can be picked up and moved to another location.
Now, was this the first of its type, Andrea?
It was. We're very excited. The governor came out to see them, I want to say, at the end of February.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was very pleased. He also came out to our emergency interim housing site, which is similar, but they look more like shipping containers, and each modular unit has 4 units inside, and these actually do have plumbing. So each unit is 120 square feet with their own bathroom.
And how do people, once they get housing, how do they start to work on their long-term plan in terms of either getting education or getting employment, or if they're very disabled, getting the right benefits to help them live the rest of their lives? How do they go about doing that?
Well, a lot of people don't have it to begin with because our systems are challenging and they don't allow for a lot of support, and they're arduous to work within. So the second somebody is checked into our facility, they're assigned a case manager or a housing specialist, and we also have therapeutic services on site for those who need it, and then drug and alcohol. But we just start working right away with the individual. What's your housing plan? What is it that you want to achieve? Is there a vocation that you want to learn? Some people are on disability or Social Security or retirement. They don't have the ability to increase their income. So we do what we can with them. We help them understand how to recycle to get extra money or how to do odd jobs to get extra money. And that way, when they are placed permanently, they're able to maintain that housing. And it's not necessarily in an apartment all by themselves. We do a lot of shared housing for people. The average rent on a 1-bedroom here is $3,000 a month.
Wow.
So it's very expensive. Yeah, and that's affordable, believe it or not.
Wow. Do you have, I don't quite know how to ask this, but do you have any feel for how many people in the country are alumni of homelessness who were homeless, like yourself, and now live, stably in a home? I mean,
that's a great question.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do not.
Yeah.
I do, because many people the average unhoused person is temporarily homeless. They're like me. They have bouts of 30 or 60 days here and there, maybe 90, a couple of months, but they're able to resolve their issue. The challenge is it gets more expensive to move into a place. The average security deposit here in Silicon Valley with first month is around $5,000.
Yeah.
So you have
incredible.
to be able to save that. And if you're working at Starbucks or Subway, how are you going to save that in a matter of months?
Right. Have they raised the minimum wage out there yet? Is it $15?
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have that in Los Angeles, although even at $15, it's not going to get you that far in terms of housing. I mean, I think another thing attitudinally, though, is to just imagine whether it was in your life or your parents' lives or your grandparents' lives, someone was homeless or a refugee or something at some point. And it's more than destigmatizing. It's there are people who are houseless who, when housed, will eventually find their way to being more productive and fulfilled. There are other people who won't. I mean, as Andy said, they have their problems, but they're as fully human as everybody else, and they need to be taken care of and respected. And, maybe, again, one of the outcomes of the crisis, and maybe with a new attitude in our country, realizing that we're all in this together and, here but for the grace of God go any of us.
Yeah.
Michael, when did you realize you would be an architect? I understand that you were 8 years old and there was a girl involved.
Well, actually, that's true, and love has always had something to do with it. Love of architecture and love of people, and love of, in this case, girls. In third grade, this girl I had a crush on brought in blueprints of a high school her father designed, and I looked at them, and then I just said, that's what I'm going to do, and I never changed my mind. I discovered Frank Lloyd Wright shortly thereafter and would look longingly at his drawings and, would start trying to mimic his line weight in buildings and printing, and that was it. And I'm just extremely fortunate that my passion and that I have enough skills that I could actually spend my life pursuing and fulfilling my calling. That's it's a long shot for anybody. So I'm very blessed in that way.
And you recently participated in a Harvard Zoom conference called Straight Up Talk Homelessness.
Yes.
And framed that homelessness is a problem that's too large for architecture alone to solve, which I think is a very refreshing point of view, as in the past, architecture has said, no problem, we can take care of all of it.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, frankly, homelessness is probably too big a problem for any singular discipline or, a single attribute of the culture to solve. But on one hand, on the other hand, I think having an attitude that, places where we house people should honor the human beings, should honor the communities that they are put into, should enhance community, and should have, as Andrea was talking about, the little house project, I think every one of these projects has to have an appealing sense of community. And as you quoted in your introduction, for me and in my practice in our work, the notion that beauty is a attribute or a rudiment of human dignity is something I believe to my core. And actually, that became clear to me when I was in the latter phases of construction of a second project in Skid Row 20 years ago. And I'm looking at some colors going up onto the building, and someone who was clearly living on the street comes up to me and says, you have to come here when the clouds are behind those columns because it's so beautiful. And, one of the best comments and compliments I've gotten in my career as an architect, and people get it. People get it when you create places that respect them and honor their humanity. And people who, at the bottom of the social ladder, people without anything else, it has even more impact. Like, you made this special thing for me? That's good, because, the restoration of a sense of dignity, of a sense of autonomy and an agency, those are, the things that people who've been houseless are have not had a lot of, and the beginning of restoring that to them, which architecture can do, is really important.
Andrea, whether a person lives in Santa Clara County or not, how can they help you? I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'd like to know how people can reach you and support your effort.
Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you. Well, we have a website, www.homefirstSCC.org, and you can hop onto the website and make a donation whenever you like.
Okay. And in terms of other resources, like what do you need there to get more of these units up? What kind of political support do you need? Do you need like truckloads of towels? What do you need?
That's lovely. Number one, we need people to vote yes. When issues around housing and additional projects come up, either at city council meetings or board of supervisor meetings for projects, we need people to be open-minded and to say yes to the project.
Yes.
So that's the number one thing we need. We also need people to write letters to their representatives at state level and at the federal level and say, hey, we need more housing and we have to do it now and we have to do it quickly. And finally, we have a whole list on our website of items that we need, and you can always purchase them on Amazon. We have links and then ship them to us. Many of them are blankets, towels, socks are a big thing, underwear of all sizes for men and women. And then sweatsuits are important because when people come to any of our facilities, they need to do laundry right away. Yeah. And so they need to wash everything. And so we have to give them a brand new, clean set of clothing that they can wear.
So they don't have to do laundry naked.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
we prefer that they don't.
Yes. And I bet they prefer that too.
Yes. You have to go to a totally different agency to get that.
Yes. Right. That's another story.
Well, Andrea, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. This is a really important issue, and it sounds like you both are making some progress in it.
Yeah.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Well, you're very welcome. Yes, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.